Alright, this video is going to be going over how to read a footprint chart. Pretty much everything you need to know about a footprint chart, what it is, how do I read it, how do I incorporate it, and what to look for. And so in order to get started with a footprint chart, we probably need to understand the basics of how a market works. So for every buyer there is a seller, and for every seller there is a buyer. That's pretty common knowledge. I would say that's safe to say that's common knowledge. So a typical bid or a typical footprint is comprised of bids and asks. So let's go into this 1 minute chart because this is what your average footprint chart will look like is on this 1 minute. And then on the other one I will get into a little bit later. So this is a typical bid-ask footprint chart, right? So the left side is the bids and the right side is the asks. So if somebody is hitting the bid, they are aggressively selling the market, meaning they are marketing in, right? So their orders are market orders. So there's two types of liquidity. There's passive and aggressive liquidity. Aggressive orders are market orders and passive orders are limit orders. Limit orders mean they have the opportunity to get filled at that price, but that does not mean they are actually filled. Aggressive orders means that they are actually filled and they are in the market. So that is what we will see on the footprint. The footprint will not show you limit orders. The level 2 will show you limit orders, and I'll get into that later in the video. But on the footprint, you can only see aggressive orders. So hitting the bid, they are selling the market, and lifting the offer, they are buying the market. So everything on the left is your sells, everything on the right is your buys. So this is a typical bid-ask footprint, and I have it set up as an imbalance footprint so that you can see the imbalances. But there's typically around 3 different footprints, and so that'll be a bid-ask, an imbalance, and a delta footprint. Quantower is a little bit different, disregard these. So I have it set up as an imbalance, so these highlighted reds are 3 to 1, 6 to 1s, and 9 to 1s. I have them all enabled. Imbalances. So this means there are 3 times more sellers than there are buyers. And these footprints are read diagonally. They are not read horizontally. So they are read diagonally. So this 21 to this 5 or to this 6. I actually don't remember which way. I guess that's my fault. They're read diagonally. So this 21 is either 3 times, 6 times, or 9 times greater than the bid this ask is, or this offer. Meaning we have more buyers than we do sellers, right? So there are more, okay, I worded that wrong. There are not more buyers, because for every seller there's a buyer, and for every buyer there's a seller. Meaning we have more buyers willing to pay a worse price to get filled than we have sellers, because they are marketing into their position. So that means they are willing to pay worse and worse and worse prices to get filled as soon as possible, and they want to get filled as soon as possible. So I incorporate this into my trading by, I see if we have a lot of stacked imbalances, meaning they are willing to pay a worse price for it to go lower because they want to get in right away. They don't care about the fill, they just want in so that they can get a piece of the pie. I take that and I use that as, okay, maybe I should look for an entry here too. If all of these other people are wanting to get in, maybe I should too. And so don't take that as a law. That is not a law, because we'll get into, when we get into this footprint over here, we'll get into a different side where you'll see a bunch of people entering the market, but that does not mean you should enter their direction. You're going to want to enter the opposite direction, but I'll get into that later. So right now I'm just covering the basics of a footprint, and a basic footprint is a bid-ask footprint. Meaning we have more buyers than sellers willing to pay at a worse price. So this 931 candle right here, you can see we have 3 sell side imbalances, meaning we have way more sellers willing to pay a worse price to get in right now, meaning that is probably a good sign that you could get short as well. I'm not saying you can, I'm just saying that's something to look for. And you also want to pay attention to this POC. This white line is the point of control. So this is where the most volume was conducted on this candle, was at the bottom of this candle. That's also something to keep in mind. So if all of the volume is at the bottom of the candle, meaning a lot of people are interested in transacting down here and not up here, that's also something to keep in mind. All right, so that's how I read these 1 minute footprints. And it's the same thing on my 5 minute charts, just a higher time frame. That is how you can read this. And then, so it can get pretty confusing. Some people may teach it differently. Obviously, you can see it's not 100% because you have to know when to use it. You have to know when to look at it. And so I have other videos breaking down the when. I'm just breaking down why right now, like why these work. What are you looking for? How to read them. All right, and so this is an imbalance footprint on a bid-ask spread. Well, not a spread. These are read as a bid-ask, right? And then so here's another thing I want to go over right now is you see all of these stacked imbalances right here at the bottom of the candle. All of these stacked sell-side imbalances, but for some reason, price closed all the way up here. We closed, like 4 points higher. Why did we not close down here? If we have all these people willing to sell, why did we not close down here and continue going lower? And so that's kind of where you get into the aspect of absorption, which is what I have on my 32 tick here. But to keep it simple right now, on the 1 minute, we can see absorption on these stacked imbalances. So if you see a lot of sell side, but we don't close here, you can kind of incur that there was absorption here, that there were the sellers getting absorbed by passive buyers, by passive bids. All right, people were setting limit orders here, and these aggressive sellers, these aggressive people hitting the bid, came down and interacted with a passive buyer here, and that passive buyer took all of this liquidity and sent the market higher. All right, so you can read that as absorption on these stacked imbalances. I don't look at it a whole lot because I use these 1 minutes for momentum and continuation. What I really like to do for absorption is on my 32 tick chart here is a delta chart. All right, so let me come to 930 because we had some examples here. So this is a delta chart. So on the left is the volume. So the volume is just the sellers plus the buyers added up, and then the right is the delta. So the delta is buyers minus sellers. It's the difference. All right. So if we have a positive 40 here, means we had 40 more buyers than we do sellers. So maybe like 80 minus 40, for example, right? So we have 80 buyers and 40 sellers. We're going to have a positive 40 on the delta here. All right, so that is one way to read these. And so these are what I would say, this is how I zoom into the market. This is like a sniper scope per se, would be a good example, is like what you're really looking at to figure out what is going on. And so this is where I read the absorption in the market and how I kind of get an inference on where price may reverse and where big players are stepping in and like what to look for. All right. So this was a good example of a trade today. I did not take it, but this was a good example of buyers being absorbed by a passive seller. All right. So there's somebody sitting on the offer waiting for these buyers to come up and interact with them. And they had a large lot order that forced price lower. So if you look at this candle, we have a plus 28, plus 58, 27, 5, 7. And down here you can see we have a 45 delta right here. So we have a positive candle, but for some reason it closed red. Why would it close red? Why would it not continue going higher if we have all of this positive delta? How does that make sense? And that can be explained by absorption. So there was a passive seller here, right, that absorbed all of these buyers and forced it lower. So that is like the reversal entry. If you were to enter off of just a pure reversal, that is where you would enter, right? If you didn't want to wait for like a higher time frame confirmation, if you didn't want to wait for selling to step in, you would see all of these large orders getting absorbed and closing lower, that would be your key to enter, all right? So like here, we have a 40 contract order and we close lower. Obviously, it comes up and it takes it out, but if you have a 20-point stop loss on this, you're fine. If you waited for a retest, you're fine. All right, so that's where it's up to you to figure out how you want to implement it, but this is just how you read it. And so now that you realize what these are, so like here's another 52, and then sellers step in on the 66 right here and take us lower. All right. And now that you know that, another thing you want to look for is this top candle or the bottom candle, assuming whatever way you're getting absorbed. So here we see sellers getting absorbed, buyers stepped in. We have this down here, we have negative 47, but we closed higher. All right, so this would have been a stop out, not unless you knew the context, not unless you knew what you were looking for, and maybe you would have never taken this. But if you were only looking for absorption, yeah, you get stopped out here. But what you can see, what these have in common, right here, is they have a finished auction, right? So this volume matches the delta. So that is what you want to look for. You want to see a finished auction. Right here, we did not have a finished auction. We had 9 volume, but we had 7 delta. So we didn't have a finished auction, meaning that there is a chance that we come up and re-sweep this, if you want to say sweep, and complete this auction right here. Ideally, you want to see the finished auction in order for us to move lower. Because if it's not finished, that means we can still come up and complete business up here. If we have a finished auction, chances are, not assuming it's in the context, that we will not come lower because this was finished business right here. Nobody wants to go any lower, right? They are happy with this price in their positions. So if you think about it, the market is going to go lower until the last seller sells, and the market is going to go higher until the last buyer buys. So the finished auction is kind of a representation of that, meaning that no more sellers want to sell here, right? Price is too cheap for them to sell. Okay, so they're done. That is what you want to see, is the finished auction. There are a lot of nuances, I would say, where maybe there aren't, like a finished auction isn't needed. So maybe you see like 150 watt delta here, which happens. You will see like 100 plus watts of delta, and so maybe then you don't want to wait for the finished auction. So it's discretion in that sense, right? And so likewise with buyers, if price gets up here, price is too expensive for them to keep buying. They think it's too expensive. They want to come lower so that they can get a lower fill. They can get a cheaper price. So that's pretty much how I read these footprint charts. What you're looking for, I would not say there's a set number. You just know. It's like, this looks good. This was a lot of orders, a lot of volume here. You don't want to see like you don't want to just see this, right? Just 135 or 23. This is not good to me. This is not enough buyers being absorbed. You want to see a lot of absorption, because a lot of buyers get absorbed. They're going to be forced to cover their position, which is in return going to initiate a short squeeze. When they cover their positions, they're going to have to get short, or no, not going to have to get short, sorry. They're going to cover their positions, which would be a sell stop, and a sell stop is just a market market buy order, all right? Because you are, so no, hold on. If you are long here, you have a sell stop or a buy stop down here. A buy stop is just a market order. So if we come down, you are marketing at the best possible price down here. So when they do that, it's going to have to continue to go lower, which initiates a short squeeze or a long liquidation. So that's why you want to see a lot of orders here. If you just see this, that's not really good. And I can't say an exact number that you want to see, because there isn't. Like, it's completely discretionary. Like this, I mean, this isn't horrible. Like a 40, anything over 30, I would say catches my eye, right? Like a 35, that's going to catch my eye. It gets my attention a little bit. And then you see here, you get a 100 watt delta on the buy side and we close higher. So maybe you could use that as a continuation trade. You know, it's up to you and how you want to incorporate it into your strategy. So I just wanted to make this video on a little bit of a better understanding on how to read footprint charts, how I read them. I have videos on how I incorporate them, but this is just how to read them and what you're looking for. So it obviously looks very confusing. There's a whole lot going on. But once you know what to look for and you realize that you're not really paying attention to a whole lot of this, you're really only paying attention to the top little bit when it hits your level, then it becomes a whole lot simpler and a lot easier to read. So like look at this here at 820, we see 70 buyers absorbed up here. We don't have a finished auction though, but we continue lower and we get a little bit of absorption there, and obviously it ends up dumping. So yeah.